Matters, the podcast on all things felting, brought to you by the International Feltmakers Association. And we are your hosts. I'm Vivienne Morpeth, coming to you from sunny Lincolnshire in England.
And I'm Heather Potten in the lovely city of Edinburgh in Scotland. Right.
Okay. I'll let you talk.
Thanks. I've been waiting for you to say that all morning. Let me talk. As if I haven't been already.
I am passing you the power. Because
Yes.
we're in our virtual studios and it's lovely to see you.
Yes, well, we're always in our virtual studios. They don't change, do they? I've always got sunshine coming in at my back, and yet it's always dark in my studio.
It does seem to be sunny days that we chat.
Yeah.
Because today we're both bathed in sunshine.
Yeah, we're here introducing Season 3, Episode 2. And we have a wonderful episode coming up with Lydia Needle, who you interviewed. Well, I was there as well, but predominantly you interviewed her about her bee project. And one of the things that set off our quest to talk to Lydia was looking at a previous issue of Felt Matters, the journal. And I thought it might be quite nice if we looked back at some of our favourite issues. And one of mine is issue 132, which was September 2018. And in it, there is a very brief article about the AGM. And that was where we first met, the AGM in Sweden. And I actually wrote this article with Karen Kohlberg, who was the international officer at the time, and she was very instrumental in organising this AGM in Sweden, in Landskrona. And the photograph on page 5 is of the committee meeting with the chair, Johanna, holding forth. And it's a beautiful photograph, actually. But what is interesting is that you and I were at the same workshop. Did you know that?
Were we?
Yes.
No, I didn't.
Well, that's what I wanted to tell you. I thought
so we were both making sculptural forms.
That's right. And I only discovered this a few days ago. So we went to Yvonne Haber's workshop.
Yes.
And I discovered by looking through my photographs that I have got several photographs of you.
Oh. Well, it's good now you can recognise me.
Yeah. So there's lots of photographs of you looking very studious and wearing
good.
blue.
I hope I'm wearing blue and working hard.
A blue handmade, of course, outfit. And one of the photographs that I have, which are on the following page, on page 6, is, I don't know if you remember, but she made a minute vessel into which she poured water. And I have a photograph of the vessel, and she's handing it from one person to the other, and it went all the way around the group. And this vessel did not leak.
It was extraordinary. And she uses that beautiful Swedish fleece as well.
That's right.
I remember coming home with some. In fact, I still have some. It's so precious. I haven't wanted to use it.
No, exactly. So that was one of the issues that, as I was looking back through them, and that brought back, wonderful memories, including when you and I met. And I thought Yvonne Habe, who makes vessels and bags, is really quite an inspiration.
Oh, absolutely. And then she stitches into them. But it's her colour tones as well. And the scale, she makes quite large pieces as well as these tiny pieces.
Yes. In issue 134, which is March 2019, she features on the front cover. And it's about the nomadic bag that she made. It's pictured next to a chair, and it's at least double the size of the chair. She says here, I was working with a vessel that I named Nomad Carrier. During that time, the extensive movement of refugees was reaching Europe. And she was thinking about contemporary nomads who are constantly evaluating what to bring. And I found that an incredibly powerful piece.
And it is, yes. And it's made in natural fibres as well, I think.
It is, and when we listen to Lydia talking, one of the things that strikes me particularly is that she talks about how artists see the world in a different way, and how she feels that artists have the answers, or can find the answers to some of the biggest issues and problems in our lives today, because they look at things from a completely different perspective.
Absolutely. And interestingly, they are both also teachers. So they are very good communicators and reflectors of these big ideas as well.
Yeah, well, we are also teachers.
We are.
We are, we are.
We
And
are.
I think if you're a teacher, you have to consider things more than once. You're not just passing on, you're not just reading something and passing it on, because if you do that, you tend not to process it.
Well, I think what they both have in common is that they have they're working unconsciously, that they're taking information and they're making it informal and engaging,
Hmm.
and sharing that with that sense of passion and enthusiasm, because that's what comes through from that iconic photograph and from the conversation with Lydia, is this absolute enthusiasm for the tiny details of the subject. And there's one point when I talk about um, the book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and in fact, I think I call it Eric the Caterpillar, but it's Eric Carle who's the illustrator. But he also has that in common, that he takes a subject and he explains it, but with not in a teacherly way.
Yes.
So it's informal, creative, just like you're saying, that the artists have the ability to see things and somehow explain things in an informal way that immediately engages us, and we're not realizing we're receiving information, and um, and we're going to act on it because we're learning unconsciously.
One of the things I remember from school is being deeply bored by history. I'm not deeply bored by it now, but my teacher
Mm.
then sat behind his desk and read from his notes. And then we had to copy down his notes. So there
Yes.
wasn't actually any engagement with the subject. It was just literally passing his written words onto our
Yeah.
page.
That's such a good example, Heather, because I mean, we all have heard of horrible histories. And that's
Yes.
exactly what they've done. They've told us what the Romans ate and what
Hmm.
the mice tasted like, and so on.
Yes.
They've turned that knowledge into joyous information, fun.
Yes.
But so the Lydia talking about bees, and bees being an integral part to the life cycle, makes it very central and topical.
I think it is. And I think that's why I enjoyed this episode so much, and the conversation with Lydia, because it really touches my heart, that's for sure.
And then we had the great joy of the conversation, which we hope that people are going to enjoy, when she talks about her collaboration and and um, what she gained from the collaboration was being able to see her work differently and
Yes.
finding a different language to
Mm.
communicate it
Hmm.
in a way that working alone she hadn't been able to do.
I think that's crucial, and
Mm.
obviously this whole series, this season, is about collaboration, and I think actually we could probably have 20 seasons about collaboration, because I think it's so important. I
Well, we've
really
got a
do.
good one in this one with Lydia. I mean, gosh, did
Yes,
she
we do indeed.
collaborate?
So I think it's probably time that we let people listen to it, don't you?
Absolutely. It's so much nicer though, Heather, because I think that gives us a really nice natural start,
Well,
that we're just chatting.
yes, and actually, I was listening to the interview we did with Alan, and as usual, it starts with some sort of laughter and then goes into the sort of serious business. So that's fine by me. But just so that you know, this is we're not professionals, although we are now getting into the
You
More
third.
sound
familiar with it.
you sound very professional. The fact that you know exactly what you're doing.
Well, Heather does. Heather's really good at this. She's our
Uh,
editor
mm,
and Alatui manager
yes,
of,
well, I
of
think
all
what
tech.
I think we've been incredibly lucky to find this app, basically, and it's a guy called Colin Gray that started this whole program, and the Alitu app is. I don't think we would have been doing it like this, would we, Vivienne, if we hadn't had that?
No, and we just it enabled us to just to launch straight into this kind of setup, and then we've just been practicing since then. But
Yeah.
I mean, I thought we needed everything scripted to begin with, but we've managed to move away from that.
So is this just sound recording or is it video calling?
Well,
Recording.
it's funny you should ask that, because as I was recording yesterday, a window popped up that said, "Do you want to take part in our trial for video recording as well?" Frankly, I don't. I don't want to be on video particularly. I don't know how you would feel about that, being on video.
Are you?
Me?
Well, anybody. I mean, I think what happened to me anyway is when we started using Zoom so much,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
our online AGMs are on Zoom. When you see an image of different faces, it makes me think about COVID days, when all we could
Yeah,
do
yeah,
was
yeah,
communicate through Zoom, and it's
yeah.
a bit of a turn off, actually, I think.
Lydia,
Oh,
whereabouts do you live?
South
Where are you?
Somerset I'm in.
Of
So
course, yes,
just
I
sort
did
of
read that.
overlooking the levels, sort of. So, last few weeks of flooding is
Yes,
visible from our kitchen. Yeah,
gosh.
yeah.
Does it
Bit of
feel
road
as
rage.
though, yeah, does it feel as though you've got a new lake there then?
I tell you what, it was very scary because we don't get flooding in this bit, and we were at the point of thinking, "Oh, I'm going to have to start moving furniture upstairs," because it
Oh
was
my goodness.
such a bizarre storm.
Yeah,
The storm was overhead, and it was like buckets of rain falling, and it was just streaming off the field, and it
yes.
couldn't get out of our garden, so it was coming up our walls.
Gosh.
Bizarre, never happened before. We've been here
Will you
21 years.
will you be digging ditches?
Well, there is a ditch out the back
Yeah.
that it runs, in theory, runs along the line of our neighbours, but we're the only ones that maintained it. So we've created a lovely pool. So we're going to be building barricades instead.
Yeah. Yeah, get those sandbags out.
Yeah, well, absolutely, we had to do that. Yeah, it was a bit scary.
Yes, we live, well, I used to work in York, so we're very familiar with all the floodings in York. And
Yeah,
I worked there for about 14 years. So over that period of time, there were two huge floodings.
yeah,
Um, and like you say, when all the fields become lakes,
yeah.
it's an extraordinary sight
It
when you
is. I
just
mean,
look out and all you see is water.
yeah, and it's incredibly beautiful, and it is what the
On
levels are
one
for.
one aspect, it is,
But
yeah.
that people, animals are trying to carve out an
Mm,
existence in it. It's very worrying, really. Yeah.
it is, yes. Well, Lydia, it's absolutely lovely to have you here in the studio with Heather and
It's lovely to
myself
be
this
here.
morning. And we Heather has been looking through the archives, and we were focusing a lot on issue 130, which is actually from March 2018. And it's a really rich journal. I mean, they're all great, but this one happens to have really inspired us. And we had a lovely interview with Wendy Bailey, and we picked up on some other aspects. And we were really interested to read about your bee project, your 50 bees project, and to see that you were needle felting, and your name is Lydia Needle, which is a lovely coincidence, presumably.
Yeah.
And we'd love to hear you chat about that.
Great. Do you want me to sort of explain where it came from, how it
Oh yes,
started?
please.
So, I'd I was a teacher. I left teaching due to poor mental health. And just before I left teaching, I went to a workshop of needle felting with a friend. A friend took me along, and the needle felt instantly caught me because I think by nature I'm a sculptor, and I had been looking for a way of making three-dimensional work. Um, but something that also fitted with budgetary constraints, shall we say, but also environmental concerns that I have.
Oh yes.
Um, and there was just something. instantaneous in that that love of the texture and the way that the wool works and all of that. So I was doing needle felt for quite a while after I left teaching. I started a business making needle felt kits. And from that, I started making connections in the craft and art world. Because I was a very frustrated artist, shall we say.
Now, what medium did you work in before then? You were a textile artist, would you say? Or
no, I would say
you were a sculptor?
I am naturally drawn to sculpture. I would say I want to make in 3D. I think in 3D, I suppose. I'm not naturally 2D. And I couldn't explain that to you. And if I was talking to another artist, they would probably say, "Oh, I'm naturally a 2D artist, like my mum, naturally drawn to working 2-dimensionally." Anyway, so I made connections in the art world, and I started to make artwork as well using the needle felt. And I was working into vintage tins because I had some and I loved them. And I loved the idea of having something secret and precious inside these throwaway, as they were in those days, containers. So that's where the working containers comes from. And then I was invited to take part in a art project, a collaborative art project. And when I was on that residency with these other artists is when I started talking about doing a project about bees, because I'd found out these facts about bees, how many species there are in the country. And I was really shocked that I didn't know, despite being a nature lover.
Yes, there seemed to be a huge number. We were amazed when we read that in your article.
Yeah, so it's 270 something, although that number is a bit it's contentious. It depends on where you read it. So it depends.
In Britain.
That's in Britain. Oh yeah, there's thousands.
That's amazing.
Thousands around the world. Yes, but the point is, I didn't know that, and I was a little surprised that I didn't know it.
I'm sure most of us don't know that. We probably think there's maybe half a dozen.
Yeah, quite. Well, that's where I was. So I was quite surprised about this, and I said I wanted to do a project about bees, and I was due to turn 50, and I explained my idea to my friends, thinking that they'd go, "That just sounds really silly, Lydia. What a silly idea of doing 50 bee species to celebrate my 50th birthday."
Yes.
And doing it as an exhibition. Luckily, because they were creative thinkers, they said it sounded like a good idea. And then I explained to them that actually the bees, although they're lovely and sweet and people like looking at them, they don't actually tell a story about the environmental issues to do with species loss and all of that sort of stuff.
So how did you bring that about then?
So, well, I said what I fancied doing was having each bee having an artist to sort of speak on its behalf, to create a piece of work that says something about the bee's ecology, whatever that might be. And they agreed. That sounded like a good idea, because that would be a much more vibrant and interesting exhibition than just 50 little bull bees.
Can I just? It's very hard for me not to actually ask you any questions.
You're doing very well, Heather. You're sitting on your hands.
I know. I am I literally am holding my hands like this in my lap, just so that. But I have to ask: how many artists were involved in this at that point?
So the conversation was myself and 3 other artists who come from different backgrounds and have different art practices, but they were collaborative type artists. So artists not necessarily making physical work together, but the idea of bouncing ideas off each other. So it was just 3 artists at this point who were we named ourselves the Bee Team, because we were we were fighting for the bees. So the idea landed, and then we needed
Did you have to get some funding? And
oh no, didn't do any of that. I mean, I should. Looking back, I mean, life would have been a lot easier if I'd have got funding. But I mean, that's a whole that's a whole other world, isn't it? But the first job was to establish somewhere to show it. So luckily there was a new gallery opening up in my local town.
Oh,
And
perfect.
we knew the curator. I didn't know her very well, but I got a friend to ask her whether she thought it might be a good idea. And she said, yeah. So that was Nina. And she said, yeah, it sounds like an idea. No evidence that I could pull this off. So thank God for Nina, to be honest, and the B team. And so then it was the task was finding 50 other artists to work with.
Yes.
Luckily, at this point, I got family and friends who are artists and makers. So I asked a few of them, and that sort of trickled out. They mentioned it to a few other people. And then eventually we had to do a social media call out because 50 is quite a lot of people.
It is.
It's a lot. That's why I was asking you how many were involved, because 50 different artists collaborating sounds quite a handful.
Yes. I tell you what, it takes some thought.
Yes.
I mean, we've all learned a lot through this process, but so long as people are given a very specific brief and, given limitations on how big they can go or the subject matter or anything like that, it actually worked really well. They, when people signed up for it, they were sent a long document that told them the size of the pieces that they could go to, the maximum size. Everything was open to negotiation, but it was just assumed that everybody would, do things to a certain size. The sculpture had to be a certain size, all of that. So actually, it was mostly done via social media and emails, and it was all organised. And on the day of setup, everything worked out, which is a bit
fantastic,
bit bizarre.
Well, you obviously had incredible communication.
Yes.
Through all of that. And so you were making the bees in these beautiful vintage containers.
Yeah.
With needle felt
and thread.
And metallic threads, I think we've seen in some of your
so it's either needle felted wool or it's waste or vintage threads. So all of the work, is basically describing how to make work using cast-offs or compostables, all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, so it's just needle felting and needle work.
We've looked at photographs of your work, and they are absolutely exquisite. But these needle felted bees, they just look so alive to me because, as felt makers, we're often trying to get rid of the hairiness of the felt, which is a bit ironic, really. But you were able to embrace that, and by allowing the little fibers to still live on the surface of what you're working, you have that lovely kind of velvetness of the bees.
Yes, yeah. Well, wool absolutely lends itself to the process of making hairy bees, and the using different types of wool. So quite a lot of them have got things like alpaca on them because alpaca's finer. And naturally dyed. So we've moved much more towards naturally dyed wools. I don't dye the wool myself, I have to say. But to make sure that you're covering all of the different colours that appear in bees. Because, again, coming from a naive point, thinking that bumblebees were black, white, yellow, and bees were yellowy and brown, and then discovering there's blue bees, there's green bees, there's red striped bees. So making sure that there's colours that covers all of that. Yeah.
So that's incredible. And then your artists, they were making interpretations of the eco-environment, the habitat that the bees dwelled in.
Yeah. So the basic starting point for every artist is that they are given a photograph from a book that I got all of my information from by Stephen Falk, which covers things like it'll tell the artist about what part of the country these bees dwell in, what their nesting habitats are, what food they might feed from, etc., their parasites, etc. And in theory, that's all the artist needs, that information. Some of the information is like 2 lines because there's nothing known about the bee. They just exist. And then it's the artist's job to interpret that information. And some of them just look at a line in that text, and it might be they're interested in doing a piece of work about, for example, a dandelion. So dandelions crop up year on year because it's such an important plant. But some other artists have done things like built a whole holiday around going to research where the bee
Wow.
lives and collecting materials from the places where the bee nests. And so the idea is that it's you don't need to do any more research, but artists have. And of course, that then feeds straight into the exhibition and the visitors' involvement in the work. You know, they come in and that everybody's always struck by different things. You know, different visitors to the exhibition will hone in on different artworks, and hopefully, because the artists have presented this ecological information in such a user-friendly way, you are informed and enthused to go away and, I don't know, encourage a wild patch in your garden, or to stop using pesticides, or to have a bee hotel. You know, so that's the job that the artists do, is to translate that dry text into these magnificent artworks of every variety.
I can imagine that it would make anybody going to the exhibition, it would make them look at a bee's life and habitat completely differently.
Absolutely. And I have learnt so much from the artists. You know, I don't do the research. I just make the bees. But the information that they, you know, tiny little fragments of information that they translate into incredible sculptures and paintings, and it's wonderful. They're a wonderful gang.
Sounds like such a rewarding collaboration. Are you
Marvelous.
still collaborating with this group? Are you still a bee group, or have you taken that somewhere else now? Your creative energy.
It's sort of stopped. We had the pandemic, and I came to the conclusion of thinking, actually, I spend all of my creative energy in encouraging other artists to research and make work, and I was feeling a bit frustrated. So I sort of thought that I'm probably done now. I don't want to do this again. So I went and did a master's project throughout the pandemic, but then we come out of it, and I've got itchy fingers. I'm waiting to make some more bees, and I'm waiting to engage with more people, because the story doesn't stop. It's a fascinating story. So we had another exhibition in 22, but it is worth noting that the 50 artists that I work with on the first one isn't the same 50 artists next time or next time.
Oh, really? Have you done this more than once?
I've done it 5 times. So
What?
I've done 250 bees. So
this is a major collaboration.
Wow, that's quite spectacular.
Oh, that's incredible. So to feel that you were so driven, really, and motivated to repeat this and to do it.
But so we're now at the stage where there's 270 something bees in the country. So we've done 250. So that stage is now finished. But what my hope is now is that I can make a permanent collection, which creates a travelling show that can be hired and go off to other places in the country, and artist groups and schools or museums or whatever can make their own work in response to the bees. And for that reason, we've just become a community interest company, so a non-profit company, so that we can do some fundraising, which we didn't do at the beginning, and which will help support my practice, but also help support the project to be like a standalone project that will stand in its own right, away from me, if you know what I mean. Because I do think I feel honoured to have been part of it, but I feel it has its own momentum now, and it needs to be carried on by other people, really. That's why I want to make those 50 bees.
I think that is the most incredible story. I'm in awe. Absolutely.
Oh, that's lovely.
Phenomenal. It's exactly what you want, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's marvelous. And what I have found in terms of collaboration, what I've found has been marvelous about this particular project is because when I started this project, I was quite shy. I was not good at talking about my own work. I'm still not brilliant at bigging my work up, if you know what I mean, like you're supposed to if you want to sell something. I'm useless at that. It is hard. However, because
separate yourself from it, to be objective.
But in a room of 50 other artists' work, it's so much easier to be able to talk about the project and people's work and why it's important. And being able to do that has informed my own sort of internal language about talking about my work. So the collaborative element on a personal level has made me more able to talk about my work because it's a collective. And that's why I feel
that's
able
really
to
interesting.
talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can talk about the 50 bees as being a really important, valid project that, yes, I did instigate. And yes, I have made the bees, but because it's bigger than that, it has its own weight. So I can talk about it. So collaboration is brilliant for that.
It's not about ego. I think
it's not about ego. Absolutely. And that is one of the things that has to stay out of the room with a project like this. You cannot have egos in the room. And anytime we have had, which has happened very occasionally, every time there's been an ego in a room, we've had to make a decision that we can't work with that person again, because if you're not careful, it can suck the energy out of something.
Oh yeah.
And
it's
the positivity.
It's either ego or you go.
That's a good phrase. I'm going to have to work with that one. That's great.
But yeah, fantastic. That's absolutely heartwarming. It really is.
Yeah,
and particularly when it is such an important thing. I mean, the bees are integral to our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. But, and I do say this to people, I say that, it didn't have to be bees. It could have been ants. It could have been butterflies. I mean, I'd love to do a project about slugs and parasites and all of that sort of stuff, because it is all part of the same story. And this just happens to be highlighting bees. But that is a really important conversation to have, because then you can talk about why are bees important. Okay, if bees are important, flies are important. If flies are important, so are slugs. So it's all of that. It's all about the interconnectedness and how we've got to look after this stuff before it's gone.
Well, look at Eric the Caterpillar. Who would have known that would be such a phenomenal children's book success?
Yeah.
But do you think it's also the fact that you're an artist, and when an artist is involved, you have this enlivening. So, I was thinking before this conversation, I was thinking back to, as a child, going around museums and seeing rows and rows of butterflies, for example, and they all had a pin stuck through them, and they were all stuck on boards in little wooden boxes and very dead. Whereas, looking at your bees, they're just, even though they are in a beautiful little vintage container and they're made out of wool, they seem alive. Then you had one in a locket as well that obviously had a great personal meaning to you. And so when an artist becomes involved and just sort of gives life to a tiny little insect thing that we might otherwise shy away from, slugs and stinging flying things, it makes such a difference.
Yes, absolutely, because the creative brain works differently. And I'm not saying that that's just artists, but I do think that creative thinking is how we communicate on a deeper level. And I also think that creativity is going to be what will come up with solutions to the world's environmental concerns as well. You know, we need people to use a cliche, to think outside the box, and artists do that in such an interesting way, don't they? And you can't pin it down. And I've found throughout this process that, you know, when people apply to be part of the project, they come in and they might say, well, I'm a printmaker and this is the subject matter that I tend to work on. And you're waiting to see what they produce. And then they'll make something completely different.
Oh, really?
Because they've just gone off at a tangent. It's not their normal. Yeah. And you could never guess what people are going to come up with.
And is that part of the collaboration then, that they have gone off at a tangent? I feel liberated.
I think they feel liberated.
Things differently.
Absolutely. They feel liberated. They feel, because they're probably working on the assumption they're making work that isn't about selling. Although we've sold work, you know, the work is coming from a different place. And they're trying to communicate something differently. But also, because we put a very strict restriction on them, and one of the restrictions is that you cannot have a visual representation of your bee in your work. So they can't slide into the simplicity of just making a picture of a bee.
Yes.
They have to go deeper. And then the little thought triggers another little thought, and they just go off. And because, of course, there's this history to the project and they've seen the work other people have done, they know that a lot of stuff's been done before. So you may as well freewheel. You may as well just get on with it and see what happens.
That's amazing, Lydia. Thank you so much. So you've really inspired us. Where can we find out more? Is the exhibition, should we be looking out for a tour of this, or can we look online?
Well, I'm hoping there'll be a tour at some point, but we're not there yet. We have got to get funding. I will be showing some of the bees and some new ones and some new response pieces during an exhibition in a place called Durlston in Dorset. That's near Swanage. It's the most amazing. It's a nature reserve that's been allowed to do its own thing for quite a while.
This is in the south of the UK.
Yeah. There's a good Instagram account for the bees and the last exhibition, so the collaborative work. So the Instagram account is good.
Okay.
And I do have a website, but it's not brilliant.
So we could put this in our podcast notes then.
Yes.
And it's just been inspiring. Thank you so much. We really have a whole new understanding of the word collaboration now.
Well, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to talk about it, because I could talk forever.
Yeah, well, I think that's always the case, isn't it? When you're so fired up and so involved in something, then, as you say, it's easy to talk about because you're not just talking about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, ladies, for today.
You're very welcome.
It's our pleasure. Goodbye.
Bye. Wonderful. Well done. That's it. Oh, she's gone. This podcast is brought to you by the education team of the International Feltmakers Association. Conceived, hosted and produced by Vivienne Morpeth and Heather Potten. Editing by Heather Potten. Music by R.T. Williams. Graphics by Rafaela Morpeth.
If, like us, you'd like to hear more from our amazing felting community, subscribe at the end of this episode. It helps other creatives to find us, and each episode will drop into your podcast platform for you to enjoy.